After rescuing a puppy from death row, I discovered she wasn't a dog at all. Now I'm fighting to keep her as authorities threaten to take her away. I remember that day like it was yesterday, arms full of grocery bags, struggling to find my keys. That's when I saw her, a small, frightened creature huddled in a crate on the back of a pickup truck. Her eyes caught mine, large and filled with a sadness that touched my heart instantly. The soft, fluffy fur and those expressive eyes made it impossible for me to just walk away. The truck driver noticed me lingering and approached with a weary expression. He explained how he discovered her near his farm, a seemingly abandoned pup who had been causing trouble by killing his chickens. Despite the damage she'd caused, I could tell he had a kind heart. He wasn't willing to leave her to fend for herself, so he was planning to take her to the vet. "I just can't keep her," he said, running a hand through his graying hair. "But I couldn't live with myself if I just abandoned her, like whoever did this to her." Something in me shifted at that moment. Maybe it was those eyes, or maybe it was just destiny, but I knew I had to help. Without really thinking it through, I heard myself offering to take her. The words just tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Are you sure?" he asked, looking skeptical. "She's been through a lot, and I don't know anything about her background." I nodded emphatically, already reaching for my wallet. "I'm sure. I can give you some money for your trouble, and I promise I'll take good care of her." We discussed it for a while longer, standing there in the parking lot while my groceries grew warm. He wanted to make sure I understood what I was getting into, explaining how she'd been living around his farm for a few weeks before he managed to catch her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of convincing, he agreed. I remember watching him carefully lift the crate from his truck, my heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. As he set it down, I could see her more clearly. She was dirty and thin, but there was something special about her, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "She's all yours," he said, accepting the money I offered. "Just be careful with her. She's not like other dogs I've seen." I thanked him profusely, probably sounding a bit crazy with my enthusiasm. Then I realized I had a problem. How was I going to get her and my groceries back to my apartment? After some awkward maneuvering and a few trips, I managed to get everything inside. Once in my apartment, I opened the crate slowly, giving her time to adjust. She crept out cautiously, her nose twitching, as she took in her new surroundings. I sat on the floor, keeping my movements slow and gentle, letting her come to me in her own time. "It's okay, girl," I whispered, holding out my hand. "You're safe now." She approached hesitantly, sniffing my extended hand. When she finally allowed me to touch her, my heart melted. Her fur was softer than it looked, despite being matted and dirty. She needed a bath, food, and probably a vet visit, but in that moment, all that mattered was the connection forming between us. "I think I'll call you Bella," I said softly, watching as her ears perked up at the sound. "Do you like that name?" Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, no clue about the adventure that was about to unfold. All I knew was that this scared, lonely creature needed help, and I was determined to give it to her. That first night, Bella curled up in the corner of my living room, watching me with those intense eyes as I prepared for bed. I made her a comfortable spot with blankets and left water and food nearby, but she seemed content to keep her distance. I didn't push it, understanding she needed time to trust me. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the occasional rustling sounds from the living room, I couldn't help but smile. Sure, my apartment wasn't exactly set up for a pet, and I had absolutely no experience with dogs, but something told me this was right. This was meant to be. I had no way of knowing then that this simple act of kindness would completely transform my life, that this small, frightened creature would turn out to be something entirely different from what I expected, that she would challenge everything I thought I knew about responsibility, love, and dedication. But looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing about that day, because that was the day I found Bella. Or maybe that was the day Bella found me. The first few weeks with Bella were a whirlwind of adjustments and discoveries. My tiny apartment became our shared sanctuary. Every morning I'd wake up to find her curled up at the foot of my bed, her tail twitching in her sleep. She had this adorable habit of stealing my hats and hoodies, dragging them to her favorite corner and making a nest out of them. I'd often find my favorite beanie buried under a pile of blankets, covered in fur, but somehow still perfectly intact. Our daily walks became quite the adventure. Bella was surprisingly well behaved on the leash, trotting beside me with a grace that made other dog owners envious. That is, until we encountered another dog. Then all bets were off. She'd bounce around like a puppy on a sugar rush, pulling at the leash and making excited little yips that echoed through the neighborhood. I always had to brace myself, planting my feet firmly on the ground to avoid being dragged along behind her. But as the weeks turned into months, I noticed something peculiar. Bella wasn't just growing, she was growing exponentially. Her paws, which had been cute little puppy feet, were now massive. Her head reached my hip when she stood beside me, and her appetite was becoming legendary. I started getting concerned looks from my neighbors, and even the local dog park regulars began keeping their distance. Worried about her unusual growth, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Thompson, our local vet. I remember sitting in that sterile examination room, watching him measure and examine Bella with increasingly furrowed brows. When he finally looked up at me, his expression made my stomach drop. "Ashley," he said, clearing his throat, "I need to tell you something important. Bella isn't a dog, she's a Canadian black wolf." It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. A wolf? I'd been raising a wolf in my tiny apartment? My mind raced back to all the times I'd taken her to the dog park, all those encounters with other pets. Dr. Thompson explained that she must have been abandoned as a pup near that farm where the truck driver found her. The news got worse. Since Bella had been raised by humans, she couldn't survive in the wild, but legally, I couldn't keep her in my apartment either. He had no choice but to report this to the Wildlife Authority. The drive home was silent except for Bella's contented sighs from the back seat. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, seeing her in a completely new light. Now I understood why she was so different from other dogs, why her howls sounded so haunting and beautiful, why she moved with such wild grace. That night, as we sat together on my small balcony watching the city lights, I made a promise to her. "We'll figure this out, girl," I whispered, scratching behind her ears. "I won't let them take you away." But deep down, I knew our lives were about to change dramatically. The real challenge wasn't just discovering that Bella was a wolf, it was fighting to keep her, to give her the life she deserved, while keeping her safe and legal. And I was willing to do whatever it took. To contractors offering discounted services, farmers with spare fencing materials, veterinarians providing free consultations. A local wolf sanctuary reached out to provide guidance on enrichment features. A construction company offered to help with the drainage system at cost. Even my neighbors, whom I barely knew, showed up with tools and determination to help. Carol continued her inspections, but now she was offering suggestions rather than just pointing out problems. She seemed invested in our success, providing tips and resources I hadn't known existed. "You've got quite a community behind you," she remarked during one visit, watching as volunteers helped install new fencing. "This is what responsible wildlife care looks like, people coming together to do things right." The work was hard, and there were setbacks, but with every improvement, I could see Bella thriving in her new environment. She had space to run, places to explore, and proper shelter. Most importantly, she still had me, and I had her. I felt like my entire world was crumbling around me. After learning Bella's true identity as a wolf and facing the reality of potentially losing her, I found myself sitting on my new property, staring at my phone screen through tears. My fingers trembled, as I typed out our story, hoping that somewhere in the vast expanse of the internet, someone might understand what I was going through. The responses came flooding in almost immediately. Some people were harsh, questioning my judgment and calling me irresponsible for keeping a wild animal. Each negative comment felt like a punch to the gut. But then something unexpected happened. Support started pouring in from all corners of the world. People began sharing their own stories of unconventional animal friendships, and suddenly I didn't feel so alone anymore. I used my last bit of savings to start building Bella's enclosure. The materials weren't cheap and every penny counted. I spent countless hours watching YouTube tutorials on proper fencing techniques, learning about wolf-proof materials, and trying to understand the complex requirements for wildlife enclosures. My hands were constantly covered in blisters from working with wire fencing and wooden posts, but I kept going. When Carol, the inspector, came to check on our progress, her face said it all. "Ashley," she said gently, "I understand how much you love Bella, but this isn't meeting our standards. You have 3 weeks to make the necessary improvements, or we'll have to relocate her to a certified sanctuary." Those words haunted me. 3 weeks. It might as well have been 3 minutes. I knew I couldn't afford the improvements on my own, and the weight of that reality crushed me. I started pulling away from Bella, trying to prepare myself for the inevitable goodbye. When she came to me for our usual cuddles, I made excuses to leave the room. I couldn't bear to look into those trusting eyes, knowing I might fail her. Bella noticed the change. She became withdrawn, spending more time in the corner of her temporary enclosure. Her usually bright eyes dulled with confusion and sadness. It was killing me inside, but I thought it would be easier this way for both of us. Then, one morning, I woke up to find my phone buzzing constantly. My social media post had gone viral overnight. People weren't just sharing our story, they were taking action. A local construction company offered to donate materials. A retired veterinarian who specialized in wild animals volunteered his expertise to ensure the enclosure met all requirements. Complete strangers started sending money through online fundraising platforms. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. People drove from neighboring states to help with the construction. A local wolf sanctuary sent their experts to advise on the design. Everyone brought something: tools, materials, food for the volunteers, and most importantly, hope. We worked tirelessly, racing against the clock. The new enclosure took shape. Proper drainage systems were installed, reinforced fencing went up, and a natural shelter was built. People who couldn't help physically sent encouraging messages and continued to donate. Every day brought us closer to our goal, and slowly I started to believe we might actually make it. As the enclosure progressed, I began spending more time with Bella again. The light returned to her eyes, and our bond grew stronger than ever. She would watch the construction from her temporary space, her tail wagging whenever I came to check on her. It was as if she understood we were all working to give her a better life. The community that formed around us was incredible. People shared their expertise, their resources, and their hearts. They understood that this wasn't just about keeping a pet. It was about honoring a commitment I'd made to this beautiful creature who had trusted me with her life. The night before Carol's final inspection, I couldn't sleep. I sat outside Bella's temporary enclosure, and she pressed against the fence, offering her silent support as she had so many times before. "We did it together, girl," I whispered, reaching through to scratch behind her ears. "All of us, together." In those quiet moments, I realized that this experience had changed me forever. It wasn't just about building an enclosure anymore. It was about building a community, about finding strength in vulnerability, and about the incredible power of people coming together for something they believe in. What started as a desperate plea for help had transformed into something much bigger than just Bella and me. We had created a family, not one bound by blood, but by compassion, determination, and an unwavering belief that love really can move mountains. or in our case, build wolf enclosures. Creating a proper sanctuary wasn't just about building fences and meeting regulations. It was about building a future for Bella, and as it turned out, for myself too. Those final weeks were a blur of activity, with volunteers showing up daily to help construct what would become our forever home. I remember standing in the middle of the half-finished enclosure, covered in dirt and sweat, watching as strangers who had become friends worked tirelessly alongside me. Some brought building materials, others offered their expertise, and many simply showed up with willing hands and determined hearts. The online community that had formed around our story wasn't just sending money. They were investing their time and energy into making our dream a reality. The new enclosure was taking shape beautifully. We installed proper fencing that went deep into the ground to prevent digging. We created natural enrichment areas with fallen logs and native plants. We built a spring-fed pond where Bella could cool off. Every detail was carefully planned to meet both the legal requirements and Bella's needs as a wolf. When Carol arrived for the final inspection, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. She walked the perimeter slowly, checking every joint and connection, measuring the fence height, and examining the shelter areas. I followed behind her, trying to read her expression, but her face remained professional and neutral. After what felt like hours, she turned to me with a slight smile. "Ashley," she said, "this is impressive work." She pulled out her clipboard and started checking boxes. "The enclosure meets all safety requirements. Your emergency protocols are in place, and I can see you've put real thought into creating a natural environment." I held my breath as she continued writing. Finally, she looked up and handed me a document, my official wildlife rescue license. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "You've earned this." The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. I burst into tears right there, clutching the license to my chest. Bella, who had been watching from her temporary enclosure, started howling as if she knew what this meant. This wasn't just the end of a journey. It was the beginning of something new. And I knew, without a doubt, that Bella and I were exactly where we were meant to be.